Hi.
Whoa!
How's it going?
It's going great. Can we chat?
Sure.
Awesome. Let me put my phone on silent.
Sure.
I love these types of things because there's a lot of noise in the world, and like I kind of despise Twitter. It's put everything into little sound bites, and that's what we consume.
Yeah.
And so a chance to sit down and like talk about stuff.
Yeah, not, all mad on Twitter. It's nice doing it in person. And it's really nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Okay.
appreciate you sitting down. Could I get your first
my
name?
Pleasure. Yeah, it's Anthony.
Anthony. Gotcha. My name is Reed.
Hello, Reed.
So you just saw me out here in the park randomly. And
Yep.
Did you look up my channel or anything? Or
Not yet. I just saw cordial curiosity, free and open inquiry. I'm all about curiosity. I did a double check to make sure this wasn't a Church of Scientology thing.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Checks out.
Cool. Appreciate it. So yeah, I have some topics on the board over there. Did you see those?
I did.
Okay. Any opinions about those or anything you want to talk about?
Yeah. So, there's a lot. Let's
We can.
let's start with the one that caught my eye was, did COVID-19 originate in a lab in Wuhan?
Yeah.
And my current position on this is I don't know, and it's something that I think is within the realm of possibility.
I've got a confidence scale to get like a precise measurement of your confidence about it.
Yep.
So if all the way to the right is absolutely yes, it did. Here is I don't know, not sure, or here is absolutely no, it did not come from a lab, or anywhere in between. Where's your current confidence about it?
My confidence would be kind of here.
Leaning towards no, but still
Leaning towards no, but
not
it's
sure.
but it's an open possibility.
An open possibility.
Yeah, I think where I'm at with, is it a bioengineered virus? Was it designed? Was the outbreak deliberate? I'm like, there.
That it was. What do you mean?
That it was that it was created in a lab for the purpose of being leaked out to cause a global pandemic for the benefit of glorious nation of China.
Okay.
Or
You're like more confident that that's the case?
oh no, sorry.
That's towards no.
Yeah. I messed that up.
Okay,
I'm like schmeh, a little smidgen.
As a deliberate
thing.
Deliberate thing.
As it didn't originate in the wet market. It originated as a presumably like an accidental breakout. I'm kind of here.
Back to there.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the natural hypothesis?
Natural hypothesis, I'm kind of like, kind of there.
Okay. What are the other hypotheses? Is it natural and non-natural? What are more specific natural hypotheses? Are there different ones?
So we have originating in the wet markets. There's also
Is that the wet market confidence?
Yeah, this would be a wet market confidence, like a natural origin.
What about not wet market? Same or different? But still natural.
I would I since that's so open, I would still put that in the realm of hereish.
Okay.
Because there's other means of viral transmission. Like Ebola, for example, that came from bats, and it was originally thought to have jumped from like simian species. And now we know more about it coming into humans through bats, where it's basically like a bad stomach flu for bats, and then it gets into humans, and it's like. So there's a gazillion different vectors. This seems to have the most evidence of natural cause, and recently I was kind of here on lab origins, but because there's new reports, new evidence coming out saying that there were a bunch of people who worked at this lab that had COVID-like symptoms, and there's a strong reason to be suspect of official Chinese government statements because the central what I've learned about the Chinese government is on the world stage they have these two conflicting diplomatic patterns. One is like Uncle Xi, Uncle China, like we're here to help out the world, like Belt Road Initiative, it's going to be great for the world economy. And then there's this other flip side that they go back and forth to, from that to what's called wolf warrior diplomacy, which is how dare you accuse us of any shenanigans, like we're straight-faced, you're evil imperialists, you're trying to degrade the good name of China. And so there's a constant need to like save face. I understand that that's a big part of Chinese global diplomatic culture and objectives. So that lends itself into a sort of skeptical eye.
Yeah, if the culture behind, where the virus came from is about wanting to save face at like all costs.
Yeah.
It would be bad for their reputation if it actually did come from that lab. So that's a reason to doubt, to be skeptical of what they say.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm hearing you say. Okay. Gotcha. So you're about 70, or leaning about 70 for the natural hypothesis.
Yep.
And for the lab, it's like 30 to 40 or something.
Yeah, kind of there.
Okay. All right. And it was much lower before, like 6 months ago. Lab leak was where for you?
Yeah, kind of down here-ish.
Yeah.
And then this percentage, why it's not zero, accounts for lack of data, lack of evidence. We don't know everything.
Yeah.
Health inspections with the WHO have become increasingly political, especially with the last administration. Backing out of funding for the WHO, and China stepping in is like, here's Uncle Xi, and but yeah, so that's kind of what accounts for that it's a hard thing to dismiss outright.
Okay. And the thing that caused you to be more confident about it was like certain lab workers were sick or had similar symptoms?
Yeah, we have verified reports now that there are people who worked at the Wuhan virology lab that in 2019, before the widespread outbreak, that they had there's multiple employees that had flu-like symptoms that were severe enough to require medical attention and hospitalization. So that's
new information. That seems to be very important information.
Correct. Yeah.
late 2019, workers at the Wuhan lab got sick, up bad enough to get hospitalized.
Correct. Yeah. So it's So the official U.S. government position now is explore that line of questioning, like that's on the table for investigation.
Wouldn't they need to be get swabbed if they work at a virus lab whenever they get sick to preserve what they're sick from? Did they do that? I have no idea how
I don't know. I mean, one would think that would be a necessary precaution, where if you do a mass tag PCR test or something like that, where these people are sick, they work in a virus lab, let's make sure they're not taking their work home with them.
Yeah, I assume there's ways to test what they're sick from, or if the virus is in. I don't know how that would work. I'm not a virology expert.
Right. So you would, so from, this is my armchair understanding of virology.
Yeah.
I'm not a virologist.
Me either.
But I know a little bit about the science of it, that you can only test for something when you know its genetic markers. So if you have something entirely new, then you label the virus based off of what the disease is. So, COVID-19 is coronavirus infectious disease of 2019. Or MERS was a big one. Middle East repertory. Respiratory, yes. Respiratory syndrome, or SARS-CoV-2 that broke out in Hong Kong. It's severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus infectious disease of 2002.
So we can only measure the disease, not the actual virus itself, because
Correct.
we don't have the technology to measure the viruses?
We do have the technology to measure the viruses. It's just, it takes time to identify what those genetic markers are, because What you basically do is when somebody's sick, you're going to get a sample of them. Usually, like if they're coughing, it's upper respiratory, so you get a mucosal sample. You run that through a mass spectrometer, which then gives you like a basic idea of what types of DNA are in that sample, and then so you look for the viral DNA, and then you can sequence it from there. Once you have a bunch of different samples, and it's kind of like fishing. Like you take little pieces of DNA that certain types of viruses respond to. So coronaviruses are only going to interact with certain types of DNA, because that's how they get inside our cells. They have all these little, like the outside of our cells are like little doors that have padlocks on them to let good shit in, keep bad shit out. Coronavirus is like a little ball of lipids that has all these little spikes on it, proteins, and those are proteins that mimic things that cells like, so they latch onto those doors. Doors like, oh, it's a good thing. They open it up. Virus, the lipid layer of the virus melds with the lipid layer of our cell, and then it just squirts in mRNA usually, and that goes through the Golgi body, goes through the protein factory process, makes viral proteins that then usually trick the cell into just doing nothing but like making copies. So you get like thousands of the suckers in there, cell explodes, now you have thousands of viruses that spread out and go on to infect our cells until our good pal killer T cell comes along with his big tentacle of death and starts like scooping them up and eating them and shit. So
okay, cool. Right. So that's one reason that got you a little bit more confident about the lab leak hypothesis. What other reasons are there for being at that level of confidence, either for or against the hypothesis out there?
So, biowarfare has always been an interest to any government that can afford to research it, and in particular, bioengineering. Like, basically, if you can do a lot of horrible shit if you can figure out how to like tailor make viruses. So rabies, for example. Rabies is basically 100% fatal. Like if you get a rabies infection, if you don't get it, if you don't immediately get viral suppressants and get treated with antibodies and other stuff, you have like a day or two and it's 100% like you're gonna die. It's awful. But rabies doesn't really survive well outside of like perfectly warm, wet environments, so that's why it's transferred like via saliva and via bites. Like animals transfer it all the time. So if you take rabies and you could make it airborne,
that would be bad.
That would be bad. Luckily, it's really hard to do that. Nobody's figured that out yet, but you can bet your bottom dollar if you have a couple $1 billion to spend on figuring out how to do that, you could research that. You could also make things like diseases that only affect people of specific races. You could effectively make like a race bomb.
It's a race bomb disease.
Yeah.
Wow.
Horrible shit. So I would imagine that the thinking in the perpetual arms race that the human species has always been in is one of, okay, well, we're the good guys, so we should try to get to those technologies first before anybody else, and if we get to those technologies and we have them and we have those awful weapons, then we're in a better position to study the counter weapons to them.
Yes. Yeah, so if we're in this arms race and we know it's a potential that these weapons could be coming, for us, it would be in our best interest to maybe get there first, and then that would give us a better chance of protecting ourselves from it. That was the rationale. Yeah,
and that's kind of, I think that stands to reason that that's how each nation state that can afford to play in that research game is thinking. I mean, that was the thinking during the Manhattan Project and other arms races. So there's definitely an incentive to study bioweapons. So it's not out of the ordinary to think that government researchers, both in China and here in America, and also in Russia and in the European Union, that people that have the money are looking into these types of things. So it's feasible that research scientists could have been playing around with things like coronaviruses and trying to figure out little biohacks for them when oopsies happen.
Yeah, so this is the rationale for giving the lab leak hypothesis some weight to it,
Correct.
because there is incentive to study these things and accidents happen.
Correct.
Accidents happen. What is the history of, like, how often do these accidents happen? Is there like a list of these things?
I would imagine there is. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Like, I would imagine we could pull up a wiki article that's like,
I'm sure there's a wiki for, like,
right,
list of
history of
lab leaks.
accidents at, like,
Yeah.
infectious disease laboratories.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the last remaining strains of I believe it's smallpox. Those the last strains are like at the bio lab equivalent of like DEFCON 5, like buried deep in a vault.
Okay.
In America, there's a lab where it's like you have to go through all these different layers if you want to work with smallpox.
Uh-huh.
And it's like that's the last remaining strain on Earth because we've eradicated it.
Wow.
So go us.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, so that's something to give the lab leak weight.
Yeah.
A pro reason. Any reasons against the lab leak at this point?
Yeah. So, one of the things I find interesting is in the conversations that you hear from proponents of the idea that it was a plandemic, or like this. And let's just consider the non-conspiratorial people, like the people that actually have good reason to believe and have good argumentation that it was either at best it was like an oopsies and there was a cover-up, or at worst it was deliberate. One problem that I have with those arguments is that you can't have a China that is both severely incompetent and super competent at the same time. Since Wuhan was one of the first places to really get cleaned up, and that city was put on a really strict lockdown, and in the Chinese system, it's much easier for the government to have control, because if, like here right now we have these people, Tucker Carlson saying, if you see a child wearing a mask, you tell them that's offensive to me. You like take it off, and like it's child abuse, and right, like you guys are making us wear masks, and right, and you have like there's this whole sort of prideful ignorance when it comes to mask wearing that you're just not going to see in Asia, and you're definitely not going to see in China.
Just if the government says something, people comply easier.
Generally, I have friends in China that are like there's a friend of mine who has a degree in biology, and he's we became friends because he's very like pro like China government, yay, and I'm critical of the Chinese government. So we've had many conversations, and from what I've learned just from his perspective, that seems to correlate with what I read in headlines and what I see in behavior in China is that people are generally trusting of the government and generally believe that the government has their best interests in mind, particularly because where China came from in the past century, which is known as the century of humiliation, and where they are now is this massive boost in prosperity and national pride and national identity. And so there's a trust there that comes from experience. And so if the government is saying, okay, we're quarantining everything, there's a viral outbreak, everybody wear masks, everybody stay home, the trains are shut down, people are generally going to be like, oh yeah, okay, well, that's what's happening. It's not going to be like, grab your guns because FEMA's coming in, like, can't take my freedom, Uncle G, right? That's not going to happen over there.
So how is this conspiracy stuff related to the giving of the lab leak hypothesis weight or no weight, or reducing the weight, reasons against the lab leak hypothesis? Conspiracy theories are just not credible. So, and this is one kind of conspiracy theory,
right? So there's when you look at the response in China to this outbreak, you generally see a very competent containment, and you see competent measures being taken, and you see the numbers coming out of China as far as they can be believed. And at that point, I kind of have to trust the data scientists that are collecting this, that they're getting numbers from the Chinese government, but because it's such a multinational effort, it seems unlikely to me that all the worldwide data collectors that are looking at deaths, cases, measures taken, that China was hit very hard by this, and then they were good at containing it. That combined with the sort of oopsie scenario, you can't you can't always have it both ways. You can't have an incompetent Chinese government that doesn't know what it's doing, that's letting viruses leak out, that has national labs that don't have safety precautions, and then at the same time you have a very accurate and effective cleanup measure intact.
Okay, now let me repeat what I think I'm hearing you say. The Chinese government is competent at, cleaning up the mess that happened with the lockdowns there. And if they're super competent at that, they should have been super competent at not allowing it to leak in the first place. So if the one competence should be evidence of the other kind of competence.
Yeah, it should suggest a type of general competence.
A general type of competence.
Yeah, a general type of competence.
Yeah, and competent governments don't let viruses leak.
Right.
Okay.
Of course, it's going to happen. That accidents always happen. Stuff always happens. That accounts for just pushing the needle in that direction. But pushing it back is that the counter arguments that argue, okay, this definitely did come from a lab, or it did leak. Those arguments start to go into the sort of false flag territory, where if it really was I guess I'm arguing, honestly, I think I'm arguing against the purposeful leak.
If you're
going to have a purposeful leak, then you want to minimize your own damage while still having credibility. And there was a lot of damage in China as far as we know and as far as we can trust from the numbers.
Yeah, if they wanted to do it purposefully, they just sacrificed a lot of their own people, I assume.
Right.
To just get the whole, that's in the purposeful hypothesis,
right,
which doesn't make too much sense.
Right, and some level of that, governments do that kind of thing all the time. The United States has done it, Russia's done it.
The false flag operations.
False flag kind of thing.
Yeah, but not on this scale.
Right, but on this scale, if the benefit would be to get China to recover as quickly as possible while the whole rest of the world is lagging behind, so that China becomes even more of a center of the origin and the controller of the world's supply chain. And right now what we're seeing is supply chains across the board are totally fucked. Can I, do you
That's
believe,
fine.
he believes?
That's fine.
So, okay.
YouTube.
Right, okay, supply chains are completely fucked. So wood, steel, semiconductors, if you want to buy a new graphics card, you got to wait till 2022.
Oh wow.
It's just across the board supply chains are royally fucked, which is absolutely against China's interest. And the reason why they're fucked is because those factories can't go to full capacity. You can't have hundreds and hundreds of people on a assembly line putting stuff together in close proximity. And so now that's starting to return, but the vacancy of that lost productivity is like a rat moving through the snake. It's just this big thing that all that downtime is now hurting everything. So as far as I can see, and I could be totally wrong on this, but as far as I can see, China hasn't really benefited from this.
If their plan all along was to have a benefit for China, that failed.
Right.
If they wanted to do a purposeful pandemic.
Right, and
not a good idea.
And again, I'm arguing against the hypothesis of it's the China virus. It came from them. They made it to destroy America. Okay, folks, believe it. Everyone's talking about it. I'm kind of arguing against that, but
but that's not really a good one to have on the table.
No, because that's as far as it being a whoopsie leaky thing. The biggest reason why I'm here and not here is lack of data, lack of evidence, and now we have a clue, if you will.
A clue.
Yeah, we have a clue.
What kind of data and evidence could come along to make you more confident about it?
I think if if the world knew exactly when and where these the infections happened with the workers who worked there, if we had access to their charts, if they presumably, since they work in a virus lab, there were probably some tests done to be like, okay, are you taking your work home with you? Yeah. And if we had access to that, I mean, that would be the most convincing evidence, is that if we could trace back, if they did that DNA report and it came out like, oh yeah, that was
there it is,
that's COVID-19
from a person who was sick in that virology lab.
Right.
It's pretty good evidence, probably.
It's really good evidence.
Yeah, that would do it for me, for sure. Where would your confidence be if we got that?
Probably like, there, and then leaving a little smidgen room for a due defense, right? Every murder trial's got to have a counter argument.
Okay.
Like international, a global pandemic by means of insanity, or something, Right? Yeah. Or like, it could be that the guy purposely infected himself because he wanted it to spread. This was his masterpiece, or something, or
suicidally depressed or something.
Right. So he purposely infected himself. So then there would still be and then the question would be, what did they know and when?
Yeah.
Like, what did the Chinese government know and when? And was it a lone actor?
Yeah.
Or it would raise those kinds of questions. But that kind of evidence would put me boop.
Okay. And you're back right now. You're at around 40. What other kinds of evidence besides the DNA kinds of evidence would raise you if we found it? What other kinds of things if we could not get the DNA?
So it would be a weaker form of evidence. It would be on the level of hearsay, which is a type of evidence, as Lionel Hutz reminds us.
Kind, yeah.
Right. We have we have hearsay and conjecture. That's a type of evidence. So this would be a type of hearsay evidence. But if you have increasing requests from the international community to open up certain records and certain points of data that under normal circumstances would be like absolutely appropriate and reasonable, and there's a precedent for those types of data and logs and all that, and then the Chinese government just says no. That would suggest a potential cover-up. It would suggest a potential cover-up. Okay. It's still kind of hearsay and conjecture, but it's cause to be more skeptical and inquisitive if that's the kind of thing that, like, okay, well, wait a minute, like, here, all these countries in the WHO, like, whenever we have these events, we open up our data, we open up our backlogs, we show the receipts. Yeah. And China's like, no, you can't do that because it's a little sus. XYZ, it's a little sus. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so more kinds of suspect evidence, sussy evidence would do it. Where would you, if that happened, if they didn't allow that, where would that go now, if that happened? I mean, it would, it would probably push me kind of like there. Oh, okay. Because it's really easy when you get that kind of evidence to be like, this is the proof. That's the proof. Right? Do you remember during the Iraq War when this argument was given? It was like, we know that there's WMDs because we haven't found any. So we know that they did this absolute like bang up job of hiding all of them, and like, yeah, right. Then it's like, no, Yeah. Right. So it would feel it'd feel like that, where it's it's like in a court case. There's no Perry Mason moment in figuring out the truth of things. It's usually preponderance of evidence. It's this and this and this and this and this and this, rather than like surprise witness. Guy from Wuhan lab comes forward and like confesses and says like, I was a part of the team that bioengineered the COVID-19 virus. It was a pandemic all along, and I worked on it. And unless that could be really verified, like that would maybe with just that guy's testimony. Yeah. Before it was verified. Unless there was a way to verify that with documentation. Because like this happens all the time with people on the lecture circuit, and like the like aliens are real
Yeah.
places where you have people who worked at Area 51, which is a very like known and understood thing. That's like what they do at Area 51 is very known and understood. And people come out and they'll say like, I saw them aliens. And then they get book deals and they get on the speaker circuit and they make a lot of money from that. And they're like, okay, well, yeah, here's your employee ID badge, but then there's no documented evidence to corroborate what they're saying. And there's every incentive for them to go out and be in public and kind of feed the public what the public wants to hear because they make money from it.
Gotcha. Cool. Any other questions we should consider about this claim and hypothesis?
No, I mean, I think that the covers kind of like where I'm at and
What would take, to move you up or down. Gotcha. Sweet.
be happy to talk about another topic too.
Want to? Sure.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Is anybody else around? Cool. Oh, cool. We can do it. That's fine. Want to do another claim on the board or something else?
Why don't you hit me? Why don't you poke around and we'll see if we can get something
Okay.
that's like that's juicy.
Juicy. I talked with someone about critical race theory earlier today. Have you heard of that?
Yes, and okay, let's talk about that because I'm gonna put on my big boy brave pants
Sure.
right now because it's